So now that we've explored the foundation of sex and gender, it's time to discuss how gender influences relationships, sexuality, and social interactions. We'll also address some of these topics regarding sexuality as we look at gender relations and sexuality. Now, gender influences relationships in many ways, from expectations of romance to societal norms around love and attraction. So, as we understand gender relations, they're not just about who's dating who. It's so much bigger than that, right? We're talking about how we interact with each other based on gender, whether it's friendships, platonically, or romantic relationships, family dynamics, or even awkward moments when you're not sure whether to hug or shake hands and you do that weird, tango dance until you figure it out, or is that just me? Oh well. So think about it. How many of you have different expectations for how you interact with a close friend, maybe one that's female versus a close friend that's a male? Or how about the way you express affection to your siblings or your parents in contrast to how you do so with your partner? Societal norms and stereotypes can really mess with our heads when it comes to relationships. Like, why do we automatically assume a woman's going to be the one who plans romantic dates or remembers all the birthdays? I mean, why you can't plan the dates? Why you can't pick the restaurant? Why you can't do the dishes? Sorry, on a tangent. Anyways, and why do we expect men to be the ones who initiate relationships or pay for dinner? I mean, why can't I ask you out to dinner? Nonetheless, these gendered expectations can be super limiting and even lead to conflict. When it comes to relationships, people also modify their behaviors. For instance, research has shown that even in situations where a gifted female student is maybe strong in her academics, within the relationship, she can change her and reprioritize things like her partner over her own educational focus. And then that's reflected as far as supported by what we call traditional gender norms. And let's not forget about the roller coaster of puberty. Again, we've talked a bit about how uh, hormones impact that. So again, think back to those middle school years, right? Those awkward, middle school years when everyone's hyper aware of who liked who, and boys were obsessed with sports, and girls were all about makeup and clothes, and puberty throws a whole wrench into everything, and it can really shape how we understand gender roles and relationships. Now, sexuality encompasses a broad range of attractions, behaviors, and identities. It's influenced by a combination of factors, right? Our biology plays a role in shaping sexual orientation. Research suggests that genetic and hormonal factors may contribute to sexual attraction. Our thoughts, our feelings, and experiences can also influence our sexuality. And these factors can include our upbringing, the relationships we've been through, personal beliefs. Social factors such as cultural norms and expectations, and even peer pressure, can all also impact our understanding of sexuality and our own sexual identity. Again, both biology and environment, so thinking about that nature nurture or gene environment interaction, they come together to shape who we're attracted to. Therefore, understanding who we're attracted to involves a process of self exploration. And this can involve reflecting on our past experiences, exploring our current feelings and desires, and learning about different sexual orientations and identities. It can be a lifelong journey as well. And naturally, people engage in sexual behaviors, the many different ways that people express themselves and their sexuality. And there's no one, size fits all. This can include everything from holding hands, kissing, and cuddling to sexual intercourse and everything in between, and possibly to infinity and beyond. The important thing is that it's consensual and fulfilling for everyone involved. And again, huge proponent for clarity. Consent means that all parties involved freely agree to engage in the activity. It must be given freely and enthusiastically without pressure or coercion. Again, consent is cool. And it should be ongoing. Let me not forget that. It should be an ongoing thing because, someone can change their mind in the midst and it should still be consistent. Now, as we understand sexual behaviors, this leads us to examine sexual orientations. And so when we talk about orientation, we're referring to a person's enduring pattern of attraction to others. And this includes topics like heterosexuality or homosexuality, bisexuality, asexuality, or any other sexualities. However, many people do not fit neatly into the categories like quote unquote straight or gay. It's more common that fluid sexuality, which refers to the idea that sexual orientation can change over time and in different contexts. So, unlike fixed categories, um, this fluid category acknowledges that many people may experience shifts in their attraction and identities throughout their lives. So, the concept recognizes that sexual orientation is not permanent, it can evolve. People may identify with different labels at different times, such as bisexual, pansexual, queer. And fluidity is normal aspects of sexuality and can vary widely across different cultures, ages, and individual experiences. Now, much of what we know about sexuality has come from the research of Alfred Kinsey, who conducted research starting in the 1940s that led to the development of the Kinsey scale. So, this psychometric tool is used to describe a person's sexual orientation based on their experiences and responses at a given time. As you see, the scale ranges from 0 to 6. So if you look there on the bottom there, this particular scale includes an X, which is to imply no sociosexual contacts or reactions. Take that as it will. It could mean virginity, or it could just mean not sexually active. Furthermore, it moves up, so you go from 0, which is exclusively heterosexual, to 1, predominantly heterosexual with only incidental homosexuality, predominantly heterosexual, but more incidental sexuality too. And it increases as the scale goes on. So you got equally heterosexual and homosexual, which is weird because I just feel like they would call that bisexual, but I ain't come up with this chart, so don't blame me. Predominantly homosexual at 4, but more than incidentally heterosexual. 5, predominantly homosexual, but incidentally heterosexual. And then 6 would be the exclusively homosexual category. But though the scale highlights that sexual orientation is not binary, exists on a continuum, reflecting that fluid nature of human sexuality, it still has its limitations as science does. Obviously, it doesn't capture the full range of human experiences, and it's still based on the idea of a binary between heterosexual and homosexual. And finally, let's turn our attention to the harmful consequences of stereotypes when applied to sexual orientation. And again, as a social psychologist, this is one of the areas that I tend to focus in. So, the concept of heterosexism is the belief that heterosexual relationships are superior and normative. And it's a pervasive attitude that can lead to discrimination and inequality rooted in societal norms. So, research by Walls, he designed a multidimensional heterosexism inventory. And this particular psychometric tool includes 23 items developed in around 2008, and it's used to measure different aspects of heterosexism, including personal beliefs, institutional practices, and societal norms. The scale uses 7-point Likert scale and points ranging from 1 strongly disagree to 7 strongly agree. And so it looks at the harmful effects of heterosexism, including things like discrimination, where people who identify on the spectrum often face discrimination in things like housing, employment, and education. Looks at legal and social inequalities that can obviously limit opportunities and rights of these individuals. Heterosexism can also contribute to mental health challenges such as depression, anxiety, and so on. And LGBTQIA plus individuals are at higher risk of experiencing things like violence and harassment. But it could be argued that homophobia, which is the fear and disapproval of homosexual behavior, is a symptom of heterosexism. It'd be a form of prejudice that can have devastating consequences. And some harmful effects of homophobia include things like bullying and harassment. For instance, individuals in this population, especially youth and adults, face increased levels of bullying and harassment in schools and workplaces. Can also present with social isolation. So, homophobia can lead to social isolation and stigma, making it difficult for individuals to build healthy relationships. This group also of individuals are at higher risk of suicide due to the prevalence of homophobia and discrimination. And homophobia can further manifest in discrimination in systematic settings like healthcare and the legal system. Now, all of these findings are further supported by the minority stress model, which is a conceptual framework that explains how societal stigma, prejudice, and discrimination all contribute to increased stress and health disparities among minority populations. And when applied particularly to the LGBTQIA plus population, this model helps explain the higher prevalence of mental and physical health issues, as well as reduced overall well-being among the population. And this is in comparison to their heterosexual and cisgender counterparts. So as we wrap up section 5 here, we've examined the multifaceted nature of gender relations and sexuality. We began with looking at the concepts of gender relations, looking at how it encompasses a wide range of interactions between individuals based on perceived gender. Interactions include things from friendships that are platonic all the way up to um, intimate relationships with partners, and it can include everything in between, like family, professional collaborations, encounters with strangers. Our discussion then pivoted to the complexities of attraction and relationships, acknowledging that these dynamics extend beyond traditional confines of sexual orientation. And then we explored the interplay of social and biological factors that really contribute to our understanding of gender and sexuality. Furthermore, we've addressed the crucial topic of sexuality and sexual behaviors, emphasizing the really paramount importance of consent and respect in all interactions. The diverse expressions of sexuality were also acknowledged, and the concept of fluid sexuality is introduced here. And again, this is that we're able to recognize potential for change and evolution of a person's sexual orientation over time. And finally, we confronted the detrimental consequences of discriminatory outcomes stemming from sexual stereotypes. The concepts of heterosexism and homophobia were discussed along with the potential to inflict harm on individuals and perpetuate social inequalities. So as we wrap up this chapter, I'd like to do a asynchronous activity. For instance, does anyone recognize the person in the image? Well, if you are a fan of Orange is the New Black, then you clearly know who this is. Laverne Cox is an American actress and activist who achieved significant recognition as a pioneer for transgender visibility and representation in 2015. She became the first openly transgender person to win an Emmy Award for a documentary on trans youth entitled Laverne Cox Presents the T Word. So, considering what we've learned and maybe even some of the stuff that we know, let's take a minute and think through some of these questions. And feel free to pause at the end to see if you get any of these right. True or false? Life experiences can cause biological differences between men and women. 2. Throughout human history, there's evidence that some societies were true matriarchies, in which women ruled the society, controlled how it operated, and held more power than men. 3. Many people who believe in feminist principles do not identify as feminist. And 4. The American Psychiatric Association considers transgender identity to be a clinically diagnosable psychological disorder. Now, if we're running through this list, question number 1 is true. Performing male-type behaviors can increase women's testosterone levels, and performing female-type behaviors can increase men's got that reversed. And performing female-type behaviors can increase men's level of estrogen. Number two, the answer is false. There are no known human matriarchies. There are, however, many examples of matrilineal societies, and that's one thing that you can look into to see how that came about. Number three, this is true. Many people support the principles of feminism but reject the label, perhaps due to negative stereotypes of feminists. Who knows? And number four, it is false. The American Psychological Association no longer, I emphasize no longer, considers transgender identity a disorder. People may, however, receive a diagnosis of gender dysphoria if they experience clinically significant levels of distress about a mismatch between their gender identity and, of course, the sex of that sex that's been other than assigned to them. So I hope that this was a nice little pop quiz that you're able to think outside the box with. And as we wrap up chapter 5, first we established that sex is fundamentally a biological aspect of identity determined by chromosomes, hormones, and anatomy. The process of sexual differentiation is multifaceted, involving a lot of complex interplay between different levels, including genetic, hormones, environmental factors, and so on. Next, we explored the concept of gender as a social construct, highlighting how societal norms and expectations shape our understanding of what it means to be male or female. We discussed how gender influences our behaviors, expectations, and relationships, acknowledging its profound impact on our lives. We then discussed gender roles, recognizing that these are learned through socialization and can be challenged. We examined how gender roles can lead to stereotypes and limitations, and emphasized the importance of questioning and redefining these roles to foster greater inclusivity and self-expression. Our discussion also encompassed the complex and multifaceted nature of sexuality, acknowledging the diverse range of sexual orientations, behaviors, and identities. We explored the interplay of biological and environmental factors in shaping our sexualities, recognizing that both nature and nurture play a significant role. Finally, we confronted the detrimental consequences of prejudice and discrimination based on sexual orientation. We discussed the concepts of heterosexism and homophobia and the harmful impact that they can have on individuals and society. And then concluded by emphasizing crucial importance of promoting acceptance, respect, and inclusivity of all individuals, regardless of their gender and sexual orientation. And I can't strive this so much. Consent is cool. So feel free to engage in the comments box here. There are a few questions I've put together. One, how have your own experiences shaped your understanding of gender roles and expectations? For instance, have you ever felt pressure to conform to a certain gender norm? Please explain. What are some ways that we can challenge gender stereotypes and promote greater acceptance of diverse gendered identities and expressions? And third, can you think of any real world examples of heterosexism or homophobia? How do these instances impact the individuals or communities involved? Again, thank you so much for tuning in to this Chapter 5 lecture. Please reach out with questions.